Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I have an issue here. At the last meeting, 6.1, the active travel update, I was talking about the strategic cycle routes, etc. And I asked for a paper fully detailing all of the strategic cycle routes from Shire to City, the progress made so far, and target completion dates. I said that basically members of the public struggle to see it, understand what we're doing, etc. And I was told by the chair that we would, well, I think it was by Ram actually, sorry, that we would get one either at this meeting or at the next meeting, and it's not in the pending papers and it's not in the minutes.
Thanks, Chair. I am quite happy to bring back a report. Apologies that that hasn't been picked up at this point. We do under item 7 an update on projects in progress, but certainly I should have picked it up under pending business if we've not got a report to today's meeting. So apologies, and we will endeavour to bring one to a future meeting.
No bother at all. Just to make sure it is an overarching one. It was really to get a, having been, as I said at the time, having been on infrastructure services for 4 years at Aberdeenshire Council, I struggled to see the correlation between what the city were doing, what the Shire were doing, what was completed, what we were working on, etc. And if I'm struggling to do that as somebody who's really quite interested in this, members of the public will really struggle for it. So it was one to bring both city and Shire together, know exactly what we're doing, what the progress we're making, what the routes are, etc. It's an overarching report, so that's what I'm asking for. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We'll look into that one on the minutes. The next part is item 2.
Sorry, excuse me, Chair. This is Elena Plews here. I'm the legal advisor. I can just see that someone else has got their hand up to speak. Councillor Glenn Reid has got his hand up.
Just for those in Teams, Councillor Reid is in the chamber, so it was Councillor Reid that was speaking. He's trying to put it down. No, it's just to let you know that he was trying to put it down, but I'll try and lower it for him.
Okay, moving on to item 2. We're going to welcome Chris Clark, who is the Rail Policy Team Leader at Transport Scotland. Chris has been in Transport Scotland rail team since 2008 and worked across a range of roles, including disability, accessibility, and longer-term strategic planning. Over that period, Chris has worked with regional transport partnerships, and there is a regular liaison meeting between the rail team and Nestrans officers. Chris is leading on delivering the National Rail Conversation, which is going to outline for the board today. So I can welcome Chris Clark. Chris Clark.
Yeah, thanks very much, and nice to meet you all, and thanks for giving me some time to be able to kind of just give a very brief introduction on the National Rail Conversation. I should say, just well, you know, you're here, we do meet regularly with Nestrans, but we've had some staff changes recently, and just for those that maybe aren't aware, so many of you will probably know Fraser Henderson, who was my manager. He retired recently, and he's been replaced by another Fraser, Fraser Lawson, who comes from another part of the Scottish Government. So Fraser normally would maybe have presented today or joined the meeting today to introduce himself, but it's his non-working day on a Wednesday, so he's not here. And my colleague that, again, most of you will know from working directly, Chris Towers, he works more closely with the RTPs. He's on annual leave today as well, or this week. So I've been asked to present to Chris's presentation, which I've been asked, or Chris asked me, you know, be a 20-minute presentation with 10 minutes for discussion. I think I'll probably flip that around. It might be more like a 10-minute presentation, and then I can open it up for any questions, if that's okay. So if you're okay, I'll just share the presentation. I'll see if I can do that. You with me?
That'd be great. Thank you.
You see that okay?
Yes, we've got that.
Right. Okay. So I mean, for those who maybe don't know, Transport Scotland, who I work for, we're effectively Scottish Government transport agency, and we work closely with RTPs. Our main remit in our team is the rail side of transport. So we now directly own ScotRail, as most of you will be aware, and we also fund Network Rail, and all that goes along with that. So that's a whole topic on its own. So I'll just move on past that. So that's just brilliant. So just a bit, very brief background on the National Rail conversation, because I'm guessing most people have heard of it. It's been referred to a few times by the Minister in Parliament, and also in the media. So just a wee bit of background. The Minister launched in the 9th, or referred to this in the 9th of February in Parliament, that she wanted to launch a national rail conversation. And there are similar ones across transport and Scottish Government. And myself and our team were tasked thereafter with scoping out what that actually means and how we're going to deliver that across the country. And the Minister's vision really is to look at, now that ScotRail is publicly owned, and it is very much a focus on the delivery of services by ScotRail and not other issues about Network Rail or the structure of the rail industry or cross-border trains, although they will be involved in it. It is very much about what can we achieve with the new ScotRail now that it's fully publicly owned since last April, and what we achieve we want to be informed by the public at large. One of the things he said was to us, this is not really a discussion between rail and transport professionals like ourselves on this call. It's about widening that out. And very interestingly, a key theme for us is contacting people who don't use rail. And we want to engage with that community where we can, and to help, our discussions with them help shape how we get people attracted to the rail who maybe don't traditionally use it. We are aware that a lot of people who use rail love rail and they'll always use it, but it's about attracting other people to the railway for two reasons primarily. The drop in patronage due to COVID. So it's about that return, which also then that includes a change in behaviours that we're beginning to see away from the traditional commuter to the leisure market. So, and that's of particular interest probably to Nestrans in the northeast. The other reason we need to attract more people back to rail is obviously our longer term climate change ambitions, where we need to, there's no question we need to attract people off the roads and onto the rail services. So the Minister has tasked us with this conversation, which we're kind of just kicking off. We're probably a wee bit behind where we would want it to have been in terms of starting this. And what I see this presentation in this meeting as very much an introduction to the board here. But we will follow this up with probably one or more meetings with Nestrans at official level to talk about, well, how can we bring Nestrans and other RTPs into the process to help shape it, and also how to get your views fed in to the conversation itself. So we're really at a starting point. And what I'll do is I'll just add to some of what's on the slide there, because Chris kind of wrote the slides. So, you know, what I would say is at the moment, we have a kind of two-phased approach in mind. The first phase is what we're kicking off now, which is direct engagement between Transport Scotland Rail team, i.e. myself and Chris and others, and our existing stakeholders, such as well, ScotRail and Network Rail. We're hoping will deliver this with us rather than them being seen as a kind of stakeholder. We're very much already talking to them about how we can use their resources. We know, for example, ScotRail have already got passenger panels and stakeholder equality group and resources like that we want to tap into. So we're currently starting off around the introductory meetings with ourselves and other RTPs, and we're hoping tonight, possibly next week, to a range of other stakeholders that we're keen to start a conversation with. So that includes, off the top of my head, the Scottish Youth Parliament and Young Scot, and we've got Disability Equality Scotland and other kind of key stakeholders that we all know about. And we think that piece of work will really take us between now and the end of this year, where we'll have a range of meetings with each stakeholder. And the meetings are really going to be a wee bit about finding out what each organisation wants us to take to the wider public, and what would be phase two. So phase two, the initiative will probably kick off in the new year. And that will be led by consultants that we're currently seeking to procure. And that will be more about the more wider direct public engagement. So we just don't have the resource to do that with our small team. We kind of originally thought we could, you know, our team could go out to stations and engage with the public, but it became pretty clear that the ambition here is a bit more larger scale than that, and to make what is going to be the final outcome or output to this, a report, to make that credible and valid and robust, we really need to engage wider than that, and that requires a consultant to do that for us. So we're hoping that we'll have a consultant in place early next year, and they'll go to the public with a range of topics and questions that are partly informed by the engagement that we're doing now with the likes of you guys between now and December. So the next slide I'll just bring up. This is what I need a bit of scope about what it is we want to ask about. I think that goes well way beyond that, and I think that will come out of their introductory meetings. We've got a list there at the moment, and it's all more focused on service delivery by ScotRail. But I think that list there will probably change fairly radically once we go out and meet with the likes of yourselves and others, and it becomes clear what's important to yourselves, and it'll be different for each stakeholder. So, you know, we're engaging with, you know, Disability Equality Scotland. We'll engage with someone like Visit Scotland, who are interested in the tourism opportunities, and they'll have different views. All of that will flush out as we get the discussions up and running over the coming months. One of the interesting ones that you may have seen fairly recently in the press as well is, for example, the Minister has now asked that we include in this conversation the existing arrangements for alcohol on ScotRail trains. So that covers the current, due to COVID, the current kind of outright ban of the use of alcohol on trains, and therefore the sale of alcohol on certain ScotRail services, and that's to stay in place right now until and it's to be part of this discussion. So that's quite an interesting topic that will probably stimulate quite a lot of views, and I'm no doubt there'll be other key topics that come up, because we have to bear in mind as well through other surveys, like through Transport Focus and work that we've done with RTPs and others, we do have a fair idea of what is important to passengers per se, in terms of, you know, they would want lower fares, and they want reliable and punctual trains and clean trains, etc. So I think this conversation's about teasing out what else over and above that is of importance to passengers, and as again I've said, to the non-passenger community that we're trying to reach out to. So I think the subject matter will very much depend on who we meet and what emerges from that. So this brings me, I suppose, to what we will be asking from Nestrans and the other RTPs in this process. And again, this is completely, you know, subject to further discussion with RAB and others and Nestrans as we go along. But what we feel is that, you know, we want to engage very much with local authorities, local communities, local groups. But our view is at the moment RTPs coordinate and have that already largely. So we will be coming to Nestrans and asking of you guys, how can we work together that we can engage with your stakeholders, which makes it easier and it doesn't duplicate work, and we tap into that resource that's already there. So that's very much where we hope we can build this up with the RTPs. And obviously, as part of that, we'll be seeking your own direct views of the conversation as well. So I think what Chris has got in mind there is that, you know, certainly over the remainder of this year and towards the start of next year, we'll maybe, you know, apart from having meetings with Nestrans and working out how we engage with the others, you know, for example, would we be asking for Nestrans to submit a formal paper, you know, maybe cleared by your board on your views. Again, to my mind, that can all be worked out as we go along over the next few months. So, and we already have that established engagement to a large extent. So it's just building on what is already there. But that's something for you to consider, whether you can assist us in that role of engaging with your local partners and stakeholders, which I think would be very, very helpful for making the conversation more meaningful and more robust. So Chris has got it down there, you know, and in terms of how to get involved, I think we're kind of working at the moment on will the minister do a more formal launch of the initiative, and how will we get the minister involved? And the minister is very, very keen to be involved in engagement. So again, down the line, it might be the minister will meet directly with an RTP or other stakeholders. We haven't worked out the detail on that. One of the issues we've got is when you go to launch something, you would preferably have the public engagement side in place in terms of the consultants, but we just don't have that at the moment because, as you will know, the procurement process takes several months to get through all the process. So I would say to that slide there that really, in terms of our work with Nestrans and other RTPs, you know, this is the beginning of it, this presentation, and it will be about us following up on that to work out what's the next steps between us over, as I say, between now and December, and then the launch will you know, public engagement launch will start sometime next year, and then ultimately the consultant will provide a report, which is hopefully based on, you know, robust feedback through this process, and the report we're looking for will have recommendations that we can take to ScotRail that, you know, that ultimately we want the outcome here to improve services and to be responsive to what the public want. The alcohol one being an example of that, where, you know, decisions about what we do with alcohol on trains will hopefully be informed by this process, and, you know, recommendations will be brought out in a report that we would hope to be then able to implement. And given that, you know, the ScotRail is now fully publicly owned, you know, that our expectation is whatever the report recommends will be delivered by ScotRail. So, you know, my realistic guess is that that kind of report will be nearer like spring next year, where we're kind of in the 1 year anniversary of ScotRail. And I think I'd probably just finish up by saying that although we're slightly disappointed that this is maybe taking a bit longer to get off the ground, from my view, given the summer we've had of, you know, industrial relations and strikes, which haven't gone away, but given the industrial relations and earlier in the summer, ScotRail had to go to a reduced timetable, for example. I think going out to the public or starting that conversation at that time wouldn't have been very productive. So I'm quite content with the slight delay in it, and that we can now concentrate and focus and get moving with it. Even though the industrial relation issue hasn't gone away and there are other issues, these things are probably never going to go away, to be honest. There's always going to be some you know, concerns. So we've now kind of thought, well, we don't want to put this off further. We want to get on with it. So, you know, this is almost like the start, if you like, the process. And hopefully the other issues around industrial relations may get resolved over coming months, but we'll just have to, you know, crack on, as they say, to the backdrop of that, if that's what we have to do. So that really kind of completes my presentation. As I said, it's just the start. Hopefully it's been a useful update, because I know there's probably been a wee bit of a lack of you know, visibility of this initiative. The Parliament's back this week, and there's lots going on, as you know, primarily around the cost of living. We think the ferries kind of issues is going to be fairly prominent as well. But, you know, we fully expect when the next week or two, you know, the Parliament will come back to this and ask where we are with it. So we're hoping now that we're kind of starting to move with it, that we can report back that we are getting things underway. So hopefully that's all. I'm more than happy to take questions on that. I'll try and take the thing off my screen. Just bear with me.
Okay, that's great. I'll just start up. Is there any questions? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation, Chris. I wondered how you're thinking, or how RTPs, and I'm having a look at RAB as well to know how much data we might have about those who don't use rail at the moment. Because of course we all know that it's not just about the services that are available at stations, it's about accessibility of parking, it's about how you get to the station, whether there's buses or you know, easy ways of getting there. So how are we going to make sure that those who don't use rail at the moment are included? Secondly, is there going to be a consideration about gender, because women and men use railways in different ways? I don't know what the percentages of, and I suppose the third thing would be around what the percentages of those who use railways at the moment are either commuters, probably more in the central belt than up here, but use it for business or use it for leisure. But also, how are we going to find out about those that come on holiday to Scotland and use our rail network, because there must be quite a high percentage of those as well. So three angles there, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think the details. So, for example, we do have some, I believe, some data and intelligence on the usage of public transport from our own Transport Scotland analysis team. So they look at household surveys and a whole range of other data. So there will be information already there. We've also got, for example, that we know of, and data that comes from Transport Focus, for example, who survey, although I believe they do work that does include non-rail potential passengers, but obviously their main work is surveying people who use the railway already. But that's one of the elements of the wider work that we'll be bringing consultants into. So, for example, I know that, or I believe that consultants who led the wider public engagement on the recent STPR2 project and the recent National Transport Strategy consultations, they sought to engage out with, rail per se. So I think there will be ways of doing that. There is a lot of analysis and data and intelligence about how people travel there already, and from ScotRail and Network Rail and others, and one of the things we would discuss with yourselves is with your own regional transport strategies and things like that, is specifically your area, what intelligence do we have between us, and that will then all be kind of brought together by the consultant. That'll be part of their task, is to look at the current landscape and the current intelligence and data that we've got, and let that will inform what they do beyond that and who they contact beyond that. So that level of detail, I'm sure we will get to. In terms of gender, I know there's another piece of work. It was actually launched the same day by Miss Gilruth, and it's specifically on women using public transport and safety. It's something very close to Miss Gilruth's heart. She's kind of frequently flagged concerns around their own experiences about getting the late night trains from Edinburgh back to Markinch and things like that. So there's a separate piece of work going on right now with Transport Scotland that's engaging specifically on women, with women's groups and girls' groups. We are focused on safety in particular. So we're going to we already link with our colleagues that are leading on that element. And again, that will overlap probably. I mean, when we contact our stakeholders, there will be probably specific groups who raise issues around women travelling in rail and in public transport. What we're keen to do is not duplicate the work. So we are cognizant of that. We'll try and not duplicate resources and work if there's the two kind of pieces of work running at the same time. And again, we've got other colleagues in Transport Scotland who are working on things like the Just Transition Commission, and there's gender elements to all of that, and the National Transport Strategy. So there is a lot of all that going on in various areas within Transport Scotland, and part of what we need to do is bring it together, but without duplicating the work and making it relevant to rail and then beyond rail, as you say. And similar for tourism, that's something we would probably discuss with Visit Scotland, and again, and there'll be other maybe tourist organisations, but we would presumed that they will have a level of intelligence gathering and data about who comes to Scotland, how they travel, and can we tap into their resource to reach out if that's possible. And that's what's going to be fairly difficult about this exercise. And the Minister is explicit, as I said, this is not to be a discussion between professionals who already like railways, which is most of us in this call, I would imagine. It's about going beyond that, and that's one of the challenges for us. And we'll make a start now with the groups and organisations that we're aware of and tap into their resources, but the consultant will probably have more scope to do that when it widens out in the next phase of the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Yule.
Thanks. There's not a card in the slot, Mark. Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it was a request. Would it be possible to get a copy of the presentation circulated?
Yeah, I forwarded it to Paul, so yeah, that's fine. It's quite basic, I would say, the slides, but again, this is really just an introduction, and we can go into more detail with Nestrans themselves as follow-up, but happy for that to be circulated.
Many thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions? No. Right, okay, well, thanks very much for that presentation. Really interesting. And we'll wait to see the slides. That'd be great. Thanks very much.
Okay, that's right. I'll just log off the call then. Is that okay to leave you to your other business?
Yep, please do.
Okay, thanks again for the invite, and we'll follow up.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers.
Right.
Bye.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3.1, budget matters, and it's Kenny Oxton will be introducing it.
Thank you, Chair. This Budget Matters report provides an update on the Nestrans budget monitoring for 2022-23 and the forecast outturn position. Appendix 1 shows the summary position as at the end of July, showing expenditure to date of £483,000. Appendix 2 contains a list of environments that are proposed for consideration by the board. The report includes an update on several external grants applied for by Nestrans. These are from Sustrans, the Customer and Communities Infrastructure Fund, and the Local Rail Development Fund. There is an update regarding the pensions discretions policy. Aberdeenshire Council's deadline has been extended to the middle of this month. Nestrans still intend to adopt the same position as Aberdeenshire Council. This will be reported to next board meeting. The report confirms the current strategic transport fund balance of £485,000. No repayments have been made so far in this financial year. It is recommended that the board note the monitoring position and forecast shown in Appendix 1, approve the environment in Appendix 2, note the update on external grant funding, note the update on the pensions discretions policy, and note the current strategic transport fund position. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any questions on that? So, okay, thank you. Can we go for a recommendation on that? Thank you. That's agreed. We move on to 3.2, accounts, which is being presented again by Kenny Oxton.
Yeah, microphone, Kenny.
Apologies. Thank you, Chair. This report is to submit the audited annual accounts for 2021-22 to be approved by the board for signature, and also includes the external auditor's report on the audit. The annual accounts can be found at Appendix 1. The external auditor's report to the board on these annual accounts have been included as Appendix 2. The board is recommended to approve for signature the audited annual accounts for 2021-22. Consider the external auditor's report and note that the accounts can be accessed and downloaded from the Nestrans website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any questions on this, or can we go for approval? Okay, that will be approved. Thank you. Yeah. Then we've got Appendix 2, the audit, yeah. the audit, and that'll be by Anne MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is our report on the audit of Nestrans annual accounts for 21-22. And I'll refer to some pages, so I'll be referring to the additional pack of papers. So that's, as Mr. Oxon's just said, the accounts are at pages 5 to 53, and my report starts at page 55. So that first page contains a letter with the position of the audit at the point that the papers were released to the board last week. And at that time, there were a couple of outstanding matters as set out at paragraph 9. I can confirm now that these are all complete and there's no matters to bring to your attention regarding these items. Appendix A sets out a copy of my audit opinion, and this is an unqualified audit opinion. And in getting to this stage, we did make one significant change to the accounts during the audit process, and this relates to the accounting for the contribution related to Kintour Station. So we've taken the view that this transaction, roughly £3 million, and the associated funding from partners in respect to this contribution, that this should have been reported in last year's accounts. So the transactions were initially included this year, 21-22, because the invoice was received this year, and also I'm very aware that there was a long process with the Scottish Government to get to the final position. But from an accounting perspective, the commitment was there last year when the station was completed and should have been accounted for at that time. So we refer to this as a prior year adjustment, and it's now reflected in the audited accounts. But I would say that the adjustment doesn't impact on any of the closing balances of 31st of March 2022. This is simply about the timing of the transaction and when it's recognised in the accounts in line with accounting standards. There was one other major change to the accounts which arose during the summer. Since the board saw the unaudited accounts back in June. This wasn't an adjustment from ourselves, but to do with revision of information from the actuary. So the balance sheet includes the pension liability, and this figure is calculated annually by the actuary. So data is submitted by North East Scotland Pension Fund to the actuary, and that produces the calculation. Unfortunately, when the data submission went in this year, it was incomplete, and as a result, the liability was underestimated. So again, the figure in the audited accounts has been amended, and it's now been increased by 130,000. And the figure now, as you'll see, is a much more comparable figure with the previous year. So again, just to remind the board that the pension liability is an accounting entry. It's not real cash entry, and it's just recognising the estimate of that pension liability on the balance sheet. The board meets its ongoing pension commitments through its regular employer payments to the pension fund. Our audit opinion also covers the other reports provided alongside the accounts. So that's the commentary, the governance statement, and the remuneration report. And we confirm that all of these have been prepared in line with the statutory guidance. Page 65 of the papers, we set out our annual audit report, and that has the detail round about the matters that are raised, but it also sets out our judgments and conclusions on the risks that we included in our annual audit plan, which we discussed with you back in June. And it also provides assurances on our wider scope responsibilities, and these are in line with Audit Scotland's Code of Audit Practice. And in the introduction to the report, we also provide a reminder of our role and responsibilities, and we take the opportunity just to confirm our ongoing independence from Nestrans. In Exhibit 1, we set out a reminder of the materiality levels that we set for the audit, and this is the level of identified error which would be permitted without impacting on the audit opinion. So a reminder of the figure for this year was 63,000. So you'll appreciate that the Kintour transaction of 3 million was therefore regarded as a material transaction. Within the report, we continue to identify capacity within the Aberdeenshire finance team as a risk, and we featured it in the action plan to my report, and that was a similar position at the end of last year's audit. But just by way of context, Audit Scotland has reported over the last year of capacity issues in a number of councils across the country. So while Aberdeenshire may not be experiencing challenges similar to others, we're just recommending this is a matter to be kept under review. This is in fact the final year of our audit appointment. It's 6 years. It's normally a 5-year appointment. It was extended by a year due to COVID. So there'll be a rotation of auditors towards the end of the calendar year. So this will be the final report that I'll be making to you. It's been an interesting audit and we've enjoyed working with you. I'd like to extend my thanks to board members and to staff for the assistance and cooperation over the period. And I'd especially like to mention Mr. Ogston from the finance team, who is very efficiently and effectively responding to all our queries. Following today's meeting, we'll put arrangements in place for the accounts to be signed. This will be done electronically as it's been done in previous years. So I'll be in contact with yourself, Chair, and Mr. Dixon to conclude matters later today or probably tomorrow morning. With that, Chair, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that report. Is there any questions? So there's no questions coming from that. So we would accept the audit report and agree it. And thank you for your time. That was a good run through of the audit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 4.1, Director's Report, and that's Rab Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. The Director's Report is an update report on liaison between the regional partnerships with the Scottish Government and others. And I've listed some recent developments, recent meetings that have been held, and a few that are in the diary for the coming weeks. I wanted maybe to highlight a couple, if I may, for the members. One, we did host an event at Aberdeen Art Gallery, an informal get-together for Nestrans Board members, which I think was really useful. I think the staff enjoyed getting to meet members old and new in the most polite way I can phrase that. And the second one I was going to highlight was that you and I, Chair, attended a meeting of all of the Regional Transport Partnership chairs in Dundee, I think last week. It was interesting to hear what was going on in other parts of the country, the similarities around the challenges that we all have, and the opportunity, I think, to work collectively and collaboratively as regional partnerships covering the whole of Scotland. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that or if there are any questions, but the report is there really just for noting and for updating members. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Yes, I would send my thanks to the members who actually set these two things up. Certainly as a new member of the board, they were very enlightening, and it's nice to get names to faces as well. Okay, to be moving on to item 5.1, Aberdeen Rapid Transport Update, and it's Kirsty Chalmers will be presenting.
Thank you. The purpose of the report really is just to update on the progress of the Aberdeen Rapid Transit project and the associated marketing and communications work stream, both of which are being funded through the Bus Partnership Fund via Transport Scotland. As previously reported, we've got Stantec, consultant Stantec have been commissioned to help us with the technical work developing the rapid transit proposals. We've had the case for change has previously been reported to the board, and we're currently working with Stantec and partners to finalise the preliminary options appraisal. That's involved, a number of, sort of client team meetings involving Transport Scotland and the bus operators, and the report on that will be brought back to the board in due course. Feeding into that, we've been having ongoing discussions with the BPF team at Transport Scotland just on some of the objectives for that. Just they're keen to make sure that we are ensuring that they're smart in meeting their standards, and that we're ensuring consistency with the objectives of the multimodal corridor studies that are ongoing. We've also been progressing work on a number of tasks for the following stage, which is the detailed options appraisal, which just takes a bit more of an in-depth look at the options that are being developed. And to assist with that, we've commissioned consultant Sistra to undertake some strategic modelling of a proposed ART network using the recently completed ASAM 19 strategic model. And we're also, ongoing discussions with Transport Scotland on utilising the outcomes of the modelling that they've done through the STPR2 work, which has made some assumptions around an ART network in Aberdeen. We're also continuing also part of the detailed options appraisal process will be a public and stakeholder engagement on those options, which we are anticipating will commence around November time. And as previously discussed, we're also in discussions with the team at Belfast around about potential site visits to see the Belfast glider, potentially later in the year. Nestrans is also managing the stakeholder engagement and communication support as part of the Bus Partnership Fund, and we've got consultants Jacob supporting us to advise on raising awareness and increasing general understanding of Aberdeen Rapid Transit and the vision. They've been working with us on developing some of the image and logo around that, which is included within the report. That's been developed in partnership with the wider Bus Alliance partners. We've had some focus groups with members of the public just to test out some of the ideas. And we've not changed the name of it, anything. We've not evolved anything from what was previously out there. And it's just really to note that this is a brand that's intended really just to guide the scheme development process as we're going through. I think as and when Aberdeen Rapid Transit moves into something more operational, it might be called something different. We don't know that at this stage, but it's really just to provide some consistency in terms of image and how we're presenting the vision for Aberdeen Rapid Transit. We've also been working on planning for engagement, and we're sort of starting to, that we're currently in the planning phases for that. And what we're really seeking to achieve through this is raising awareness of the work that's being done to develop and secure funding for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, to help build support for that concept and to encourage people to participate in any consultation processes that will be coming out in the near future as part of that options appraisal work. We're really wanting to increase awareness so that when that consultation does come out, there's a maximum opportunity to increase responses, to increase understanding of what it is and how it fits into the bigger picture. So we've got a couple of planned engagement activities with key stakeholders that are coming up. We've got an online briefing session available for all councillors coming up on the 15th of September. It will be a short event which will hopefully give an overview of what Aberdeen Rapid Transit is for those that aren't already aware, enable a bit of discussion, and very much a starting point for engagement going forward. We would hope that could be followed up in the future with the offer of more in-depth discussions for those that have got more of an interest in being involved and finding out more. We're also planning engagement with MPs and MSPs and community councils as part of that lead into consultation. So I think probably, assuming consultation we're anticipating consultation in November, so we would anticipate some activity in the weeks in the run up to that, updates to the content on the website, perhaps some media releases and social media activity in the run up to that. So really it's just an update report at this point. So the recommendations are that the board note the progress of the ART options appraisal and the progress being made on the engagement, marketing and comms work stream and the activities planned for autumn, October, November. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Is there any questions? Councillor Yule.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for both the report and speaking to it. I hesitate to raise this, but I will. The strapline, a visit for public transport in North East Scotland. The people who live here don't call this area North East Scotland, they call it the North East. And just, why stick an unnecessary Scotland in when we call it the North East? But I'm not going to. I just make the point.
Will respond. I mean, I think we actually thought surprisingly long and hard about this strap line and the options. And I take your point. I think that locally people do refer to us as just the North East. But I guess if we're looking at promoting this within the North East, but also across Scotland and across, hopefully a project of interest further afield, that we don't want to be confused with the North East of England, I guess.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering in the bigger picture of data gathering and so on, whether we have had anything yet, and there might well have been, but have we had the Transport Scotland report on the opening and the effects of the AWPR, which I know was in progress, but I can't remember ever seeing it. So it was really just to ask if that had come forward yet.
Chair, I'll try and take that one because Kirsty's panicking. I'm not aware of having seen the report, actually. They do normally do a 1 year and then I think a 3-year report after major schemes open. Obviously, 1 year after the opening of WPR was smack in the middle of lockdown, and we can understand that there have been delays around that. We have asked that question of Transport Scotland, and we can ask it again, but I'm certainly not aware of having seen that final report.
Thanks very much. I think that would be very useful because, part of our whole narrative is about locking in the benefits of that huge investment in the Northeast, and it would be good to get that data and that analysis, because quite often transport, some of the data we get is from the past quite long time ago. So I think it would be very helpful, not just for this project, but for this and other projects.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, certainly something we are picking up on. The ASAM 19, which Kirsty referred to, the Aberdeen sub-area model on a 2019 base. A lot of the work around that has been about confirming its relevance in a post-pandemic situation and a post-WPR situation. But there is maybe a little bit of work that we can do and come back on.
Okay, next is Ian Ross.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just noting the November date for some engagement, and I'm just wondering if Kirsty has any thoughts about dates and progress after that on the options appraisal itself. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think the anticipation, and it is somewhat subject to being able to get the results from the modelling exercise to feed into the consultation, but would be consultation around about sort of November into December, and then we would be looking to report, I think, substantive findings of that detailed options appraisal to committees in February. Well, I know that there's been some slight changes to committee dates and structures, but around about February time, there's a Nestrans Board in February, which we would hope to report the detailed options appraisal report following the consultation activities pre-Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kirsty, for this paper, presenting it. Obviously, I'm quite a new member of Nestrans, so I might be a bit late with this, but sometimes when you have new eyes onto something, they throw up little surprises. So I'm quite stunned that our options don't include the Bankery corridor. So I don't know if it's too late to include that, but Bankery is the 8th largest town in Aberdeenshire. Most of a significant proportion of visitors to Aberdeen head out and they go to Braemar, Ballater, etc., and they go along that corridor. So why we're not developing a business case for that corridor, it stands out as a glaring omission to myself. So I'm sure there's a reason, but I'd be asking yourselves and the board and Nestrans whether it's not too late to include that. We're just developing business cases. If we don't have current funding for it, can we look at getting additional funding? Because we've still got quite some time to go with this, and yeah, it just doesn't look right. This is a vision for the whole of the North East, but we're missing a fair chunk of it. Thank you.
No, absolutely. I appreciate the picture. I'll just sort of expand, I suppose, on the wider work of the Bus Alliance and how the A93 corridor fits into that. We, as part of the North East Bus Alliance, we'd identified all the priority corridors, which included all the radial corridors that we wanted to look at. We then, through the RTS, have developed options for Aberdeen Rapid Transit, which we have, at this point, the vision is that that's anchored by park and ride sites on the three corridors that there are already park and ride sites on, and one to the south, and that's very much looking at the proposals for Aberdeen Rapid Transit. But those priority corridors of the Bus Alliance still remain, and that includes the A93 and it includes the A947. And we do have a multimodal corridor study ongoing on the A93, similar to the multimodal corridor studies that are ongoing on the A96, the A944, and the Ellen to Garthy corridor. The only difference really is that the other three are being funded through the Bus Partnership Fund. And whereas Nestrans is funding the corridor study for the A93. So there's a very similar study, multimodal corridor study ongoing, looking at the corridor from Bankery into Aberdeen. It's being funded by Nestrans, but the client teams is Nestrans, Aberdeen City Council and Aberdeenshire Council. I believe that there was some option, that there's some consultation that's already been gone, and that the consultants are looking at options, very much focused on bus and active travel options for the corridor. I think the corridor itself has got some very different characteristics to some of the other ones. Like you say, the tourism angle is particularly strong on that one, so I know that they are looking at all of those issues. So I would say it's not been forgotten. It sits as one of the priority corridors for the Bus Alliance, but it's not being funded through the Bus Partnership Fund in relation to ART. But we are still looking at it very much as an important corridor and a key corridor. So I hope that answers the question, but happy to go into any more detail.
Yeah, thanks very much. It does explain some of it. Can we have a paper back on that? I mean, it seems really bizarre to me. I mean, I can see that obviously there's two sets of funding, etc., but we're developing a vision for public transport in the North East, etc., and we're doing two separate studies at the same time. If we, well, not ourselves personally, but they should be, together, so that members can actually, have an idea of what's actually happening right across the North East with this transport. So if you wouldn't mind bringing a paper back, that'd be great.
No, that's absolutely fine. And as I say, because it's being funded by Nestrans, that report will come to the board at some point, and we also will report on the bus action plan within which all of that sits. So yeah, that's fine.
Okay, is there any other questions? No. Okay, so we put the board to recommend that note the progress of the ART options appraisal, and note the progress being made on the engagement, marketing and communication work stream and the activities planned between now and November 22. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.2, Bus Partnership Fund governance, and that is Kirsty once again.
Thank you. Yeah, this paper again linked to the Bus Partnership Fund and presents some considerations for the future development of governance arrangements for the Bus Partnership Fund. I've outlined, just for background, the funding that's currently been awarded from Transport Scotland through the fund. That Bus Partnership Fund agreement is between Transport Scotland and Aberdeen City Council. And the current stage of development really concludes at the end of, around the end of March, and is very much around the sort of options appraisal, as I say, for the multimodal corridor studies, and some other things. I think the partners have received some feedback from Transport Scotland as the funders of the BPF, that although the governance plan is sort of fit for purpose for the current stages of work, they flagged a risk that it's unlikely to sufficiently cater for the overall programme of activities as we move into the more complex kind of design and construction activities. Just to summarise, the existing governance arrangements very much fit within the existing council structures. We've for example, South College Street, improvements to South College Street are being managed by Aberdeen City Council through their existing governance for major capital projects. Multimodal corridor studies are predominantly reported through the appropriate committees of Aberdeen City Council and also Aberdeenshire Council when that's appropriate. Each of these are being managed, as I said, by a sort of client steering group involving the City Council, Aberdeenshire and Nestrans. There will be a future multimodal corridor study from Aberdeen to Portlethen and onwards to Ormskirk, and it's likely that Nestrans would manage that just due to the cross-boundary nature of the work. As I've mentioned already, the options appraisal work for Aberdeen Rapid Transit and the marketing and comms is being managed by Nestrans. But there's also a role for the North East Bus Alliance, which provides a formal forum to report progress and discuss issues with the bus operators. I think it's worth noting that the bid to the Bus Partnership Fund was very much a Bus Alliance bid. It was a partnership bid. Aberdeen City Council are the lead authority because there was a requirement for the lead authority, but the Bus Alliance and Transport Scotland have been very strong on the fact that it's a partnership approach. So the Bus Alliance is there, and I think will become particularly important as we move through some of those matching kind discussions and the requirements to develop bus service improvement partnerships. There's also an officer bus operator working group, which has been formed really to guide the corridor studies and the ART development and coordinate activities with various partners and with Transport Scotland. Officers from Aberdeen City Council are fulfilling the programme support role for financial change requests and progress monitoring and reporting with Transport Scotland. Going forward, there's proposals and the funding bid allows for the recruitment of a manager, and I know Aberdeen City Council have been undertaking some preparatory work to recruit for that role, which would, I think, the purpose of which really would be to provide a conduit between officers and elected members and to manage the coordination of the various strands of the BPF work. We've put in some proposals. There's a proposal really potential would be for a programme board made up of senior board of directors, senior managers, perhaps distinct from the officer working group, potentially to provide scrutiny and strategic direction across the various projects. As I say, it's a complex picture across all the different work streams. And we anticipate that a board could comprise of senior transport officials, bus industry representatives, and possibly other senior regional figures with an interest, potentially. The purpose of this really would be to ensure consistency prior to any gateway reviews, reporting to committees and ensuring appropriate region-wide, an appropriate region-wide view of the scheme as a whole. Just noted that the City Region Deal has a programme board of a similar type and is potentially an option that we could pursue. They have some powers delegated by the local authorities. So we set out some options in relation to political decision making. I think the current governance structure is fit for purpose for the stage that we're at, but looking ahead, I think decisions are going to be needed on aspects of the bus network that have a region-wide perspective. There's likely to be requirement for decisions that have an impact on existing commercial arrangements, such as bus service improvement partnerships, considerations around bus franchising, and implications really for the wider financial management issues that might come out of any options for Aberdeen Rapid Transit. So I think there's going to be a requirement for decisions and an ongoing requirement for sort of these quite major decisions as the business case work progresses. So we've set out 3 potential options really for discussion and for consideration. It's considered that presence of the Nestrans Board, and other committees, there's not really a requirement for entirely new arrangements, but the 3 options that we've set out revolve around a do-nothing approach, using existing arrangements between the Nestrans Board and appropriate council committees. A do-minimum approach, utilising existing strategic committees, but developing a clearer protocol around the sequencing and hierarchy of decision-making. And a third option, which around a regional subcommittee, potentially establishing a specific regional subgroup, potentially sitting beneath an Nestrans Board with a remit on bus partnership matters, whose recommendations would then cascade to the main strategic policy committees. We're not presenting a recommendation on these. I think it's really just to start a discussion on this. We don't believe that a do nothing a do-nothing approach would meet the requirements of Transport Scotland, given the feedback that we've received from them, but really open-minded about the pros and cons of options B and C. So the recommendations, as I said, is really to sort of note the current governance arrangements of the BPF and future requirements for political decision making related to bus operational issues, and to note the emerging proposals for the appointment of a bus partnership fund manager and establishment of a programme board, and to provide comment on potential options for future political decision making related to strategic bus operational issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. Any questions? Councillor MacDonald.
I suppose more of a comment, but maybe a question coming at the end. Would it be helpful to do some sort of SWOT analysis on the, even if it's just the two options, not the do nothing, but the do minimum and the regional, just to see, the issues that are there and what we have already, and to try and balance, especially for new members who perhaps might not know the workings and the history of Nestrans and how it is, as you say, fit for purpose of where we are just now. But what might be the challenges that we can that might present, and which would be best. So I'm not suggesting we do that today, but it might be something for members to feed in after the meeting and just think about what. Either for depending which hat you've got on, and whether that's officers and or politicians, just to see what is going to be best going forward, and teasing out some of those things that that Kirsty mentioned around franchising. It's a movable feast sometimes in the bus industry. Things happen. Sometimes first bus is up for sale, or it's not, or there's difficulties in the market. It's difficult to know what appetite there is for risk as well, I think, and I think it would be worthwhile taking some time to look at those options and be better appraised, I think, before we land on one of them.
Okay, that's great. No other questions? Okay, I'd like to thank Kirsty for them to 5.1, 5.2, and I go for the recommend that the board note the current governance arrangements for the Bus Partnership Fund and future requirements for political decision making related to bus operational issues on a regional basis. Note emerging proposals for the appointment of a Bus Partnership Fund manager and establishment of a programme board, and provide comments on potential options for further political decision making related to strategic bus operational issues. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to 5.3, Inverary Digital DRT study, and it will be Paul Finch presenting. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Chair. Again, we're sticking with a bus theme, but perhaps we're moving from a main corridor and urban environment to a more rural environment. Aberdeenshire Council have been undertaking a review over a number of years of their supported, tendered bus network, which often operates in rural areas and in between the main corridor, route corridors, and often is a vital service in linking up the smaller villages and smaller towns for people who have no access or limited access to car, to a whole range of social, shopping, economic activities. The challenge of that network at the moment has been of declining patronage and increasing costs, which provides a fiscal challenge to the council in terms of maintaining even a lifeline service for many of these towns and villages as well. Aberdeenshire Council therefore took over almost a root and branch review of different options
And in January 2021, as part of the Infrastructure Services Committee, agreed a revised approach to supported bus delivery and to trial a pilot demand DRT service to be developed, and to evaluate that and to see, well, does it work? How does it meet the different objectives? So a lot of this work has been done, and credit goes to Aberdeen Shire Council's Public Transport Unit. Nestrans' view on this is we have a strategic interest in making sure that the whole of the Northeast is properly connected. So we were helping to fund the evaluation work that was undertaken. So we were partners in the evaluation, but we weren't necessarily funding or supporting the actual operation of the bus service as well. The evaluation, and I think the evaluation study has been reported through the member officer working group of Aberdeenshire Council, but we've been able to publish it on the Nestrans website and make it more widely available. So basically, it's almost a ring up and go on your smart app and there's 5 minibuses operating within a particular area, within a particular time zone. The benefit is that if you have the concession cards, they're viable on this as well. And there is a software behind it which matches the requests to the rides and allocates them around the area. It's been very successful in terms of improving accessibility. It's been very popular amongst many of the population, although obviously some people have had to adapt to the new way of getting a bus, no longer turning up at a bus stop at a particular time. There is perhaps more integration required with technology or the phone system as well that Aberdeenshire Council provides. It seems to have reversed patronage decline and certainly better catering for what otherwise would be unmet travel demand. I think Aberdeenshire Council would probably admit that it's required more housekeeping than they'd anticipated in terms of keeping the thing running and intervening where the software perhaps comes out with some slightly irregular outcomes, perhaps 2 buses going not quite to the same people, but where you could see, well, perhaps one bus might be a more elegant way of resolving the demand. Costs have been higher than the fixed route side of things, and the carbon impacts seem to be relatively neutral, but perhaps that's a function of the vans that have been procured, the minibus buses that have been procured for it as well. We believe it is groundbreaking in terms of the degree of ambition and the size of this scheme. I think it's probably the first in Scotland, if not in England, in Britain, using this type of technology on this scale, although there are obviously smaller examples elsewhere, particularly in Wales, and I think in Kent and Suffolk as well. Aberdeenshire Council have decided to support the operation for a further 12 months because they understand that the evaluation says there are potential ways that the software could be improved, and hopefully during that process they can learn how perhaps the costs can be better rationalised and see what the opportunity is for that. So that's a further 12-month operation, and I think that continued evaluation of performance, costs and other key criteria will be particularly important for that. Nestrans, again, have an interest in this, and we believe that there's actually a stronger case for highlighting this at a national level and actually presenting this, what I believe is a best case example of innovation on the national agenda, and seeing how we can get other people on board to help fund it and support it and learn the lessons across the country as well, for the benefit of Aberdeenshire, as well as also trying to understand where this model, if it is appropriate, can be replicated or trialed or tweaked in other areas as well, because there is a potential for it to help overcome this wicked problem of declining patronage of the fixed and route network versus something more innovative and flexible, which meets more demand as well. But obviously, one has to be cognizant of the revenue impact of that. And we all know that the revenue pressures that we're all under at the moment. So that is briefly me talking to it as well. There are 3 recommendations to note the outcomes. to note Aberdeenshire Council's intention to continue with the operation and to support officers' attempts to attract additional funding streams for such innovative and beneficial pilot projects. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions, please? Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Paul, for this. Before I go with my question, I'd just like to attest that I'm either lucky or unlucky in the sense that this pilot falls half in my ward and half out of my ward. So Director Alan Wood over there, he's probably sick of me emailing him and asking him if he can expand this to the other half of my ward, because one half of my ward absolutely loves this. It's solving a lot of the problems that we have with rural connectivity. And the other half are going, for the love of God, why have we not got this? And again, it's been expanded for another year, so there's lots of frustrated people and there's also lots of happy people. There's lots of issues over the software, etc. But on the whole, this has the potential to solve a lot of issues, not just for the countryside services, but also peripheral services on the outside of Aberdeen City. This may be places like King's Wells, etc. In lots of little towns or little clusters of places, this is how you can actually solve some of the the public transport issues. So I really do applaud the work that's been done here, and it's actually, when you come down to the recommendations, 4.1c, support officers' attempts to attract additional funding streams for such innovative and beneficial pilot projects. Yeah, well, Paul said it's it's groundbreaking, it's pioneering, but it is more expensive than anticipated. That's because no one's done this before on such a scale. So it's really, in the pre-meet that we had at Aberdeenshire Council, I asked the question about supporting this and additional funding streams, etc. And they outlined that they plan to go to the Scottish Government Community Bus Fund. It's been scoped out just now. That's one possible source of additional revenue to fund this, because we don't want this to stop. We really need, this could really provide a significant solution for not just Aberdeenshire, Aberdeen, and much wider nationally in Scotland and in the UK. So it's, what can Nestrans do? What can you do to actually assist this? There's lots of funding being pumped into the city centre in South College Street. There's 10 million quick win solution there. What can we as a Nestrans board do to help actually fund this and keep this going?
It's a great challenge, Councillor Reid, and it's a challenge I think we need to be up for, because, as you said, the potential here is significant, and I see the significance not only for northeast of Scotland, but also nationally, because I represent, or I help coordinate a group looking at these issues across a lot of Scotland as well. We need to look broader than perhaps just the traditional public transport things. I think perhaps Chris, when he's talking about, perhaps we need to be thinking about the just transition funding. Perhaps there are other pots which are perhaps not traditionally been associated with transport, but perhaps that's something that we can be looking at as well. But yes, the difficulty being it's revenue and not capital. Capital funding, often pots are available. Revenue funding is always a challenge to keep that one going on and on. And I think we need to use the platform and the reputation that Nestrans has to raise it at a national level and say, come on, guys, this is something that can hit all your objectives with the National Transport Strategy. It can contribute to your 20% reduction target. There's a whole plethora of things that this can directly contribute to in terms of the social inclusion targets, the health equalities agenda, the employment opportunities, the safe access for women and girls as well, because it's more responsive, not hanging around the bus stops as well. So there's, it ticks so many boxes. I've talked about my enthusiasm for this project as well in terms of the presentations to the board and the previous board as well. So yeah, I think we need as Nestrans to be batting this as best as we can in partnership with Aberdeenshire Council. I note that a national transport conference, this is going to be one of their headline papers highlighting this as well, which ourselves and Aberdeenshire Council have supported as well. So I think we just need to bang on about this, but not just bang on to it, but bang on to it intelligently by saying and demonstrating how well this fits the full range of national transport and economic, the national performance indicators perhaps would be the key to this. I hope that helps.
Okay, next, Councillor Hutchinson.
Yep, thank you. It's just you mentioned about. So I'm getting slightly distracted. You mentioned about being the largest project in the UK, and kind of also about it being a rural kind of intervention. Just kind of obviously, this is still moving forward and developing. Potentially in the future, and I realise probably quite a few years down the line, could there be scope for this to maybe be done on a is there kind of a cap on how large a scale it could be done on, and potentially could it have uses within urban areas? Like, I realise they're kind of quite a bit away, but just kind of in the concept, would it be something that may lead to that, or would it just be much more suited to your rural areas? Just as a question.
It's a really good question. One of the constraints on where to roll it out comes from the fact that this is being done within the existing bus legislation framework, that's the 1985 Transport Act, where it is difficult for subsidised transport, and this would be probably subsidised transport, to be seen to be in competition with or taking away funding from viable commercial services. And great care has to be taken to show that this is not abstracting from commercially viable services. So there is that almost anti-competition piece that's enshrined within the current bus framework, which means that any scheme has to be very, very carefully designed in terms of its areas, the times, the fares policy and things like that, such that we can clearly demonstrate that it's not taking away viable services, say from Stagecoach or First. So I think that would be, in the current legislative framework, the constraint on, oh, we can do it here, or we can do it there. I think it so happened in Inverurie because of the shape of the network and the pattern of subsidised services that Aberdeenshire's public transport unit had the confidence to implement it in that area. But I think one of the constraints at the moment would be on that legislative piece that we have to make sure that we fall within as well. Actually, that legislation controls an awful lot of how interventionalist we can be on the bus network, both in the city and the Shire. So yes, I think there is opportunities. I think we just need to learn the lessons, but also be careful about it. I think there might be opportunities for smaller scale ones, perhaps around access to employment or something along those lines. That might be quite an interesting piece around that one. So I see the ambition, but on the other hand, I've got to put my legislative hat and say, oh, we've got to be careful on that one. But that's, I think that bus service regulation is something that's always been looked at, and we'll just have to see where that one goes.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll have Ian Ross, then followed by Councillor Cox.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, it's great to hear about this being successful, and what I was thinking about is actually, I think, being largely covered by Councillor Hutchison's question. I was going to ask Paul if he was aware of, or maybe had feedback from Aberdeenshire colleagues about anything around Inverurie which contributed particularly to the success, or is it just a good initiative which has got every right to be successful?
I think it's a good initiative, and I think it has every right to be successful. And I think a lot of that glory should be with Aberdeenshire Council for taking the innovative step on this as well. So Nestrans obviously is supportive of this. I just have the pleasure of perhaps presenting this report to you today. I think it helps that Aberdeenshire, Inverurie is an academy town. It has a community hospital. It has a certain level of demand inherent within that area, and is also surrounded by reasonably sized villages and towns, which can feed into that, but also a range of other disparate destinations such as Kintore Station and various work locations that almost spread around that area as well. So I think it's a good mix of traffic demand, i.e. houses, but also the destinations as well. So I think that has contributed to the success of it as well, in an area which is relatively affluent and relatively lots of car accessibility in there. But again, it's good that it seems to work and has broken through that typical car dominance, which can occur, as I know myself, something from that Kingswells Edge of City area, where I think a lot of families feel reliant on having that second car or driving around perhaps their children, for example. So I think that I think Inverurie is a good example. I think other examples could be applied as well, and it'd be interesting to see if that could be tested at a future date.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Has there been a small video produced to show how it works as a part of your PR around that?
I'm not aware of a video being undertaken to date, but I think that's a very interesting suggestion. Potentially, if I know that it's been very popular with younger generations, and perhaps a YouTube video, or I dread to say a TikTok video with I'm not too sure if any of you and daughters might be up for that, but we will see if that's a suggestion that I could put to Richard, because I know that they will be thinking, now that there is that commitment for the further year, about how they might further market the usage of it, and perhaps a video might be a really elegant way of helping some people who have slight apprehension about the technology of how it might work. So that's a very interesting consideration, and I will be sure to pass that one on.
Thank you. There's lots of kids. There's cheap options, still quality. Going back to Glenn's point about extending it, is it possible to get some sort of budget cost, so we've got a picture if we do think about developing it further, just as a sort of indicator for the next meeting? Because I think the point's well made. If we have to connect the communities, I can, like Banff and Macduff.
I think it's possible to see how that might work. But again, I think we would probably need to have on the other side of that, perhaps some commentary on the legislatively constraints as well. As I said about that competition, but I think that perhaps a commentary on costs, benefits, but legislatively the legislative envelope that we're working as well might help. I'll take that to the Aberdeenshire's Public Transport Unit and discuss how we might be able to take that one forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Thanks very much. I think it is a really interesting project, and it's one I think we've talked about in one way or another for many, many years. And it's good to see it coming on board. But I do think we need to remember that at the moment it's neither financially nor environmentally sustainable, and we need to look at ways of improving that. And the report says that that's going to be difficult, and that's the bottom line, is that it will be difficult to make it more financially and environmentally sustainable. But I think Glenn's quite right that the rest of his constituents in East Geary would like it. The whole of Aberdeenshire would like it, and I think that there might be merit in having a few pilot programs to look at different communities, because certainly some of my communities are very cut off from services, and it takes a long time for that modal change from the car to the bus, because we've become so reliant on cars because we don't have access to bus services, that it could take years. And quite often, there was one of my constituents was ill recently and was unable to drive, and has realised the usefulness of the once a week bus that they can have. And it takes that sort of thing sometimes to get that systematic change in behaviour. So it needs to be a much longer term project to really drive into that change, and we need to find a way of making it financially sustainable, never mind environmentally sustainable. Well, that could come with technology, with vehicles, but at the moment it's too expensive for Aberdeenshire Council to cope with, and we'd welcome further support from other places.
Okay, thank you. Alan Wood.
Chair, thank you very much. And can I start by saying thank you to the board for their comments on this paper, all very positive and very much appreciated. I think just to pick up on some of the points that's been made, we absolutely recognise that there's positivity around this scheme, and I think the reversal or the mitigation in some of the decline in patronage are really positive. I think some of the social benefits that Paul outlined as well are really important. The other point is, I think we are struggling to do this on our own in terms of an elongated period. I think the extension of the pilot is fine in the area that we've got, but I think that success that we're seeing is also creating demand elsewhere, and that demand elsewhere just now in the current model is proving expensive. I think the resolution of some of the software issues, some of the routing issues, some of the bus issues, along with financial, is going to aid us to extend this. But I think that assistance from elsewhere, and there are options, I think, as Paul is setting, is useful. What I would suggest, if I'm picking up on some of those comments, is that we bring a paper back once we've got more information through the extension of the pilot, and to do that in short course, I would suggest, and then get views from the board about how we look to continue with this. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, happy to bring back a paper to a future meeting. I think it is significant, though, that it is an Aberdeenshire scheme. You know, we're reporting it to board today because we've been involved in partners, and particularly because we've been involved in the evaluation part of it. But the scheme itself, you know, we must recognise is an Aberdeenshire scheme, but we will work closely with Alan and colleagues in Aberdeenshire to see how we can support, how we can facilitate, and particularly in speaking to Transport Scotland about the funding needs of particularly rural authorities, but local authorities in general. So I think Paul mentioned there is a community bus fund in the Scottish Government's budget for this year. I think from memory it's about £1 million, which is fairly significant, but divided by 32 local authorities, it quickly gets chipped away at. But you know, we can talk to them about the opportunities that the Inverurie pilot has had and the demonstration that it's beneficial to communities. Thanks.
Councillor Reid.
Yeah, I'll just be very brief. It's just what Isabel said, just comment on that. Yeah, I mean, environmentally, I mean, the bigger picture as well. I mean, you were talking about younger people and people, you know, actually getting access to it. We have like the under 22s all getting free bus travel, and you have a discrepancy over some places have bus services and some don't have bus services. If you don't capture these people now and get them onto public transport, that's it, they're lost. They'll always be car dependent. They'll always be looking for getting a motorbike or whatever their access is. This gives them an opportunity. I mean, there's so many young people actually using this service, you know, to go and see their friends, etc. But if you switch it off and if they don't have access to public transport, that's it. They'll become car users. And the bigger picture is that's not good for all of us.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, okay. Put to the board the recommendation that 4.1 A, B and C be recommended. Thank you, that's agreed. We'll now move on to 5.4, Live Labs, which is Paul once again.
Thank you very much, Chair. Nestrans commissioned some scoping work of potential innovative projects last year, and this was funded as part of the strategic transport appraisal element of the Aberdeen City Region deal. And I'm bringing this report just to sort of tidy up and present the final report. We kicked off looking at mobility hubs, and they are almost edge of town ways of which the population could access a range of services, transport and lockers and things like that. We looked at alternative fueling hubs, perhaps electric or hydrogen. We looked at mobility rural as a service applications, demand responsive transport, which was the subject of our last paper. Was there any innovation in monitoring or dissemination of data? And was there anything on haulage efficiency, which could include facilities? Through a lengthy process of research, stakeholder interviews and workshops, these 5 concepts were developed into a long list, whittled down until we had almost a short list of more specific proposals, one around regional hydrogen refuelers. At the moment, there are hydrogen refuelers in Aberdeen City, but if you're looking to develop a hydrogen economy, that really needs to be rolled out into on a regional basis. Was there potential on temporary e-charging facilities to support seasonal pressures, perhaps in the national park? We looked at potential around mobility hubs in Aberdeenshire. Conversely, we also looked at mobility hubs in Aberdeen City, and possibly there were more greenfield opportunities in Aberdeenshire, but more how can we augment existing hubs seemed to be the direction of going in Aberdeen City. Through the previous European project called Civitas, Aberdeen City Council have developed a digital travel planner called GoAbs, and there was a proposal, perhaps could that functionality of that be extended? And again, we looked at that digital DRT piece. Was there any augmentation of the functionality of, say, the Ready to Go around Inverurie scheme as well? When we whittled it down further, it decided that the e-charging facilities, there was questions about the effectiveness and the feasibility of that. The GoAbs app, we thought that could perhaps be best taken forward as part of a package of mobility improvements in Aberdeen City, perhaps augmenting some of the work that's been done on frameworks and master planning in the area at the moment. And because of the extension of the digital DRT scheme, we thought best to leave that one alone at the moment and just to see how that runs its course through. So accordingly, at the City Region Deal Committee in June, they accepted a report recommending that 2 streams of work continue to be developed, and that was around the hydrogen refuelling facilities in a regional facility such as Peterhead or another key centre. But the Peterhead element did actually nest quite well with proposals being developed at that point and are still included within the North East Green Freeport bid, particularly thinking about the connectivity between Peterhead Port, the Port of Aberdeen, and the amount of freight that travels between the two, and whether or not that provided an opportunity for hydrogen fueled freight pilots. And very much keen looking at mobility hubs as well, and again looking at how that might be developed in Aberdeenshire and how those concepts might actually be rolled out in Aberdeen City, perhaps building on existing hubs, or perhaps a virtual mobility hub, virtually using the information available on the GoAbs application. So a summary of the report's recommendations is provided at Appendix A, and the final report isn't on the website yet, but we will put it onto the final onto the website. And the recommendation at this stage is to note the outcomes of the study, and I'll take any questions if people have any. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Is there any questions? No questions on that. So we can go to recommendation from the board is to note the outcomes of the study of the scoping of potential live lab interventions. That's agreed. We move on to item 6, which was not taken up. Item 7 is a progress report, and it's just open to questions. Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Not being parochial, but page 130, 130, just check it is. Yeah, just the A947, it's the A947 route action, but some of the narrative is about the bridge. I just wonder why the presentation's made that way, rather than separating them out, because they are 2 different projects. I'm quite happy for you just to take that away. I said it leads to some kind of confusion because they're 2 bids, 2 projects.
Okay, thanks for the comment. We can certainly look at that in future presentation.
Thanks.
Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. It's just about the reporting. I was looking at the status and a lot of arrows going up, but when you read the narrative, it's saying things like no progress, etc. It's just, you know, when I look at this through, I look at all the arrows going up, and I look at the ones where there's no progress, but in a little more detail, they don't quite align as far as I'm concerned. An example is RS3 on page 135. The narrative says no progress to date following a reallocation of available resources, recruitment underway, but there's an arrow going up, but really it's not anything on that. And I noticed that in quite a few of them. It's maybe just an update thing.
Okay, again, be happy to have a look at that for future reporting. Yeah, maybe just a legacy of having made progress in over the period, and it's been an up arrow, but it maybe just needs a review. Thanks.
Any other questions? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cox.
And is there any progress in A96? Is there a position? Is it still out to consultation? Just to get an idea of where we are, if it's going anywhere.
We have partners have emailed Transport Scotland for a progress update on that, but unfortunately we've not received a substantive response on where that was. Obviously they had their issues consultation before the summer, but unfortunately we've not heard any feedback on that, and we have asked.
Okay, that's sorry, Ian Ross.
Yes, just coming back to an item that was in the director's report as well, in Rob's report 4.1 about the Central Belt rail option, and looking at progress and an arrow going upwards, as has just been commented on. The item says that the outline business case was hoped to be in the summer. That would be this summer, I presume. Just wondered if, from the meeting that Rob was involved in, if there was any update on what's actually happening. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. That was the update we got given at the report, sorry, at the meeting that I reported on. There is an article in today's Press and Journal implying that there may have been a delay by a statement that the Transport Minister has made, and we have contacted Transport Scotland today to try and get clarification of whether that has been a delay or whether it's just a different interpretation of what the progress is. So we are chasing that one up, and we'll look at trying to ensure that there's continuing progress on it.
Okay, there's no other questions, so we'll move on to item 8, publications, and that will be Kelly Wiltshire.
Hello everyone. This is some publications and consultations that have been published recently. Obviously, due to the summer recess, there isn't as many as there normally would be. Transport Scotland have published a zero emission energy for transport forecasts, and this is actually quite an interesting set of forecasts with different scenarios, and it's actually quite an interactive report. You can go into it and change the scenarios for different transport modes. So if anybody has some spare time and wants to have a little go, it is quite an interactive forecast. There's also an energy savings trust survey out at the moment asking local authorities and regional transport partnerships their views on mobility hubs. Mobility hubs are very much around how we can connect multi-modes of transport, so people to have multimodal journeys, so people walking, cycling, wheeling, linking up with public and private transport, and helping inform Transport Scotland of the type of mobility hubs that might be feasible in Scotland. So the recommendations for this report are very much just to note the publication and to instruct officers to complete the Energy Savings Trust survey. If anybody's got any questions, happy to take them.
Okay, there's no questions there. So thank you, Kelly, for that. And just instruct the board to go for the recommendations of 1 and 2. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly. Moving on to item 9, information bulletin. Back to Paul Finch.
Thanks very much. Again, very briefly, an update on the North East Scotland green port bid that Nestrans have supported the wider regional partners on. We've been feeding in on the innovation piece of work and the land and planning piece of work, just making sure that there was coherence around the transport proposals that were developed. The bid has been submitted. I think there's been an awful lot of positive campaigning around it as well, although we await an announcement on the outcomes of that. I believe that there's 5 have been submitted, and the current proposals are for 2 to be selected from Scotland. Obviously, a part of the region's key part of the goal for net zero and just transition around that. And I think I've provided a link to the big bid page for those who need a requirement to update themselves on that one. And then there's some updates there on the work that the Get About have been doing, some of the advertising that's been going on around, particularly around how we're sharing space in the outdoors and on the use of some of the cycle and shared spaces as well. And then there's a bulletin on Appendix 1 about some of the press statements that have been coming out around and news coverage as well. I would note that one of the items in the news coverage was around about an event that was held at Brewdog for the campaign for North East Rail, and we understand that they've been successful in achieving some funding for a feasibility study as well. We'll await further details on that. And I think that's everything for the moment, Chair, and I think the recommendation is just to note the contents in the report.
Okay, Councillor Reid.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paul. Just a quick one for you. Again, I'm new to this. So the Get About campaign, very interesting. Quite often cycling from Kintour along the Deeside line, etc. And it's quite well used by a mixture of different people, and everyone's quite respectful. How do we measure the success of this campaign at the end of it, kind of thing? So we've advertised over the summer. How do we collate whether it was money well spent? Did we actually improve active travel, sustainable travel, etc.? What's our plan for that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because some of the adverts that we're putting out are relatively low value financially. And there is where do we draw the line on that evaluation side of things, where the evaluation might be possibly 10 times as much as the advertising in some respects as well. I'm going to see if Kelly's got some, I think Kelly's done some previous evaluation work on the Get About work previously, which happened prior to my involvement at Nestrans, and Kelly being the expert on Get About. So I'm going to pass the ball across to her and see if she can, because we've had previous discussions on this.
Hi there, thank you. Yeah, there's a few ways that we look at evaluation. Some of it is purely anecdotal feedback. The Share the Space campaign was actually raised from the local police. Myself and my colleague John Barron have actually been out on site to Deeside Way and spoke to the police officers to try and address some of the concerns and find out what some of the issues were around sharing the space. They also were raised by the city wardens. So we were taking on board all the different views. My colleague John also went to a local community council meeting as well. So when we're developing a campaign, we're very much doing it in partnership with others and issues that have been raised. In terms of the evaluation for things like the Deeside Way, we do actually have cycle counters on the Deeside Way, so we can actually see how many people are using the Deeside Way, and we can see whether numbers are going up or down. In terms of evaluation, whether the advertising is working, that's a lot more difficult to do. And as Paul said, sometimes can actually end up being more expensive than the actual campaign itself in terms of going out and doing evaluation and doing surveys and reports and things. But it is certainly something that we can do. And as Paul mentioned, we have done before. We did a Get About evaluation of the whole of the Get About and what was working and what wasn't. We did some focus groups and some surveys and things as well. That was quite an expensive thing to do, but again, it is something that we're more than happy to do in the future, and we can certainly do that. But certainly at the moment, a lot of it is done, whether it's a road safety campaign, it's very much around anecdotal evidence we're getting from our partners, such as the police or the city wardens, as well as the cycling pedestrian counters that we have on the ground. But happy to take any further questions, or if you're really keen on us doing evaluation, that's certainly something that we can look at as well.
Thanks very much for that. I mean, I don't want to commit unnecessary funds and waste money, etc. But I'm curious as to, I'd love to see a paperback on it. Sorry for asking for lots of papers, but you know, I'm interested in this. You know, what you want it to be as effective as possible. You want more people doing this. So, I mean, younger people might not be listening to the radios because they're not driving cars, etc. So, how do you reach these people? Somebody joked before about TikTok and videos, etc. I mean, it's just really to see what we're doing. Is it working? What can we do more, etc. That's all. Thank you.
Yep, we can certainly bring a report forward on that.
Rab.
Yeah, just to confirm, yeah, we're happy to bring back a report. We used to do a quite extensive monitoring report, actually, and one of them was always number of hits on our website and on the Get About website, for example. We tend not to do that now on a regular basis, just for the sake of it, but we'd be quite happy to bring back a specific report. We can maybe have a look at that. There has been talk about evaluation being potentially more expensive, but I do accept that, yes, we need to occasionally have a look and just check that we're getting value for money for what we're doing. So quite happy to bring back a one-off report rather than something that necessarily grows arms and legs and becomes bigger than the programme itself. So thank you.
Absolutely, and one of the reasons I'm asking as well is, I mean, I think this is a city-based only thing. You know, if it's successful and it's doing well, why don't we, you know, once we see that information, this could be introduced to Shire or whatever. You know, that's a thank you.
Yeah, if I could emphasise, it's not just city; it is very much a regional brand. Previously, the two councils, the Health Board, Nestrans, all had funding. We're all looking at doing very similar things around promoting sustainable travel. So Get About was about pulling together all of the resources, the staffing, and making sure that we had a consistent and single voice, including some of the others, Energy Savings Trust, the two universities, for example. So very much a partnership. There are some campaigns which are focused on Aberdeen City. There are other things which are very much Aberdeenshire leads on. We tend not to use the Nestrans logo or the Aberdeen City or Aberdeenshire Council logos, rather going for the Get About brand, which we hope is recognised across the region about sustainable travel. We've had television adverts, we've had events ongoing for many years now. And yeah, it takes a long time to build up that recognition, but we feel that it's been worthwhile working collaboratively in that way.
Excellent. I must admit, I've not seen it in the Shire, but I have seen it in the city, so okay, better open my eyes.
Okay, Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, there's mugs, there's pens, there's everything, I think, with Get About on it. My point was going to be around, at a recent Mela Festival, we did an evaluation and it was done, and I can't remember the cost, but what we did use was QR codes, and I think that was really helpful in capturing people and getting them to engage that way. So just to throw that into the pot.
Okay, that's no more questions. Thanks. Thanks very much for that. Move on to item 10, conferences and presentations. Representation, sorry, and Brad Dixon.
Thanks, Chair. Just a report for noting, letting you know which conferences Nestrans have been involved in since the last meeting. One or two that are upcoming as well. We always keep members appraised of what we've been involved in, where we've been going, and presentations that we've been making. So it's there for information and for noting. Thank you.
Councillor MacDonald.
I saw an email today about the bus summit on the 13th of September, and I just wondered if that was something that Nestrans might want to look at going to. In, I think it was in Glasgow.
It's not one I've picked up on, Councillor MacDonald. If you want to forward it to me, quite happy to have a look at it. Thank you.
Okay, that's no other questions. So the board will recommend note the contents of Appendix 1. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 11, pending business, and back to Rab.
Thanks, Chair. Again, a paper for noting or for adding anything that you think you would like brought to future meetings. One thing I was thinking we might do a presentation on bus matters if members thought that would be worthwhile, and a number of major reports coming forward which we've noted there. Thanks.
Is there any questions? Oh, Councillor Cox.
Sorry if I've missed it, but we kind of covered or touched on freight transport. Rob, is there any update on that? And maybe I'll leave to you whether you suggest it should be on here rather than me suggesting it.
Yeah, I mean, freight's certainly something that we would intend to bring reports back to the board on a sort of regular basis. It was discussed, I think, at the last meeting or perhaps at the Art Gallery event that a freight update would be worthwhile. We do have a freight forum which Nestrans facilitates, involving business partners such as the Chamber of Commerce and major hauliers come along to. Transport Scotland are involved as well, and I think probably we're due one of these meetings. So perhaps we could look at facilitating a freight forum meeting and then bringing back to members the outcomes of discussions around that. So quite happy to bring back a report at a future meeting.
Okay, there don't seem to be any other questions. So the recommendation is the board note the report of pending business. Okay, that's great. That's the end of the agenda. I thank everyone for attending today in person or online, and that will be closing the business for the day. Thank you.